founded the American Missionary Association, and their goal was abolition and education. Switch forward a couple of decades. Charleston, 1865. Abolition finally is not an issue anymore, but education is. So, the AMA, the American Missionary Association, is the founding force behind Avery, building a school for recently freed slaves, freedmen and women. The people that were in the AMA were those, New Englanders, both white and black, but they were very much associated with a lot of denominations, Presbyterian, Methodist, but specifically with the Congregational Church as well. So, there had been a history of Congregationalism in Charleston. Many people think of, the Circular Congregational Church on Meeting Street, which actually gives Meeting Street its name. It originally was the White Meeting House. A great fire in 1861 goes through the city of Charleston, burns that church down. So the church is looking for a home. And after 1865, now blacks can worship separately. There had been a law in antebellum, South Carolina, after an aborted slave rebellion in Charleston, that blacks could not have their own congregations. That if X number of blacks met together, they had to have a white person there sort of supervising. And since that slave rebellion came out of a black church, the black church had been abolished. But in 1865, all of a sudden, these black congregations could start up again. And so then AMA has got a very, with their congregationalist bent, they're very interested in, promoting Plymouth as well. So they do that. So, the AMA is hiring principals for Avery. They're hiring ministers for Plymouth Church. And oftentimes they're the same people going back and forth. People are doing double duty. The role of the AMA is to basically, abolition and education sort of combined in Avery, combined in the Plymouth Church as well, too. So it's interesting to note that a lot of the, the early teachers at Avery were white. The principals were white, except for Francis Louis Cardozo, whose father was a white Jew from the city of Charleston. It's a very cosmopolitan tale, who is educated in Glasgow. But so Plymouth and Avery, the personnel are going back and forth constantly, and actually Avery is built before Plymouth Church is built, and so then the Plymouth congregation actually worships in the main hall of Avery first. So the church is built about 1872 or something like that.
Started in 1870.
Yeah. Opened in 1872, and that was with AMA funds. Did it, and it's not until about 1895 or so that the church is sustainable. How surprising that there's going to be squabbles about who the minister is, in the church. So the congregation doesn't want the minister that the AMA appoints, so eventually they sort of pull themselves away in the 1890s. But it's interesting, that's why it's called Plymouth, because it's connected back to, the Congregationalist of New England. And apparently in the cornerstone, when they first built Plymouth, they put the founding principles that the Pilgrims had first signed before they actually came to, landed in America at Plymouth Rock. So that's basically why there was such a crossover and a transference between the two. And obviously the missions of the school and the church, were the same, in the 19th century and in the early 20th century, up to the 1950s or so, is basically uplift, education, and struggle against intolerance. So, and Avery itself, unfortunately, it's a private school. The AMA slowly weans the funds away from Avery by 1947. It becomes a public school, a segregated school, supported by the city of Charleston, but not for long. Avery's graduates were so good, they were putting pressure on the College of Charleston. The only thing that was in their disfavor of getting into the College of Charleston is that they were black. And so then the city of a county takes over Avery as a public black high school, and many people know it's in 1954 that actually Avery is closed by the school board, and because there's a new campus built on Burke, and they transfer all the students from Avery to Burke. And meanwhile, Plymouth stays in that neighborhood until about the same time as well, about 1957 or something like that. So now you've got the real stuff.
As I understand the records, it was in 1860, about 107 or something, folks left Circular Church about sort of the leaving. I mean, did they all just stand up one morning saying, "See you guys, we're gone," or was there a fight, or was there? I mean, do you know anything about the actual separation?
I don't know, but I will say, the Unitarian Church comes from an earlier split, with the Congregational Church, even in the 1700s. The Unitarian Church now there on Archdale Street.
Yeah.
So it has a history. I think there's at least one member of Circular here that might know about that. But the black members would not have been allowed to go out by themselves and to worship on their own. They always had to have a white minister there, sort of shepherding and interpreting the Bible. In our great wisdom, we made it against the law to teach, slaves to read in 1834. So the whites were actually interpreting the Bible. As a friend of mine calls it, salad bar Christians. Picking out the things in the Bible that they want people, to know. But so I'm sorry, I don't know
So
about
they
this.
left in 1860.
Well, I know in 61 after the fire, the whole congregation was moving around town trying to find a place to worship.
Oh, okay. So you think it may have been related to the fire as much as
The building
Civil
disappears
War.
in 61,
Okay.
and so the congregation does not have a home. So they're sort of itinerant, moving around town trying to find places to worship.
Was it circular before this latest building?
Yeah, and actually, there are pictures. It's a great Robert Mills building with the big columns in the front, big steeple, but it was circular in the back. So it was still, at that point, it was a circular building. So when circular was rebuilt after the Civil War, again, it's certainly, very visibly circular now as well, too. But it was circular, round shape before the Civil War as well.
In the Mills building, for those of you who may not be familiar with Mills, he was from Charleston.
Otis Mills,
Yeah,
of the Mills House Hotel.
Yeah. He was America's first native-born architect.
And this is Robert Mills.
Robert Mills,
right?
yeah.
Yeah, he was born in Charleston.
And he designed the fireproof building, did a number of courthouses around the state. I think there are about 7 or 8 still left. And when Andrew Jackson got elected, and one of the things Mills also did was an atlas. He developed this very detailed. You see it on the walls of lots of people's homes, individual counties. So he developed the atlas, and he went up, and Andy Jackson, who was from South Carolina, had just gotten elected, and so he gave Jackson one of these atlases, and Jackson pointed to the place where he was born in South Carolina. But anyway, so Mills gave him this pitch about, I'm America's architect, and we need to quit relying on these Europeans, and yada, yada, yada. So Mills was commissioned to do, he designed the Washington Monument, the Treasury Building, big portions of the Capitol Building, parts of the White House. That Mills, the church, this early circular church, had this huge dome that was supposedly the biggest freestanding dome in the country at the time. So anyway, so that's Avery and Circular Church. Charles.